With the spot that the New York Rangers are in so far this season, looking like potential sellers at the upcoming NHL trade deadline, there definitely are some question marks on which players are going to be a part of the long-term future of the New York Rangers. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at each individual player on this New York Rangers team and talk about whether or not they could/should be a part of the long-term future. So let's get right into it here, starting off with the forwards, and we'll begin with Johnny Brodzinski. He's been someone who's kind of bounced up and down a bit with this team, but, obviously does have a 2-year contract right now. He's got a next season as well with a $778.5K cap hit. So obviously pretty manageable there. A nice kind of depth forward to have there, playing here and there on the fourth line. He's not a bad player at all, so I can definitely see him being on this team for another season or two, possibly. Maybe eventually kind of leaves this team, but him being a kind of nice depth forward with this team, obviously quite familiar with this organization, makes sense. Can I keep him around? But obviously not a super impactful player. Then we've got Jimmy Vesey, who is an expiring contract. Another guy who has been a nice kind of bottom six player, fourth line kind of guy for the most part there, but with him being an expiring contract, maybe he does get traded away if this team does look to be kind of really sellers. So maybe you can get a kind of mid to later round pick for him. Might not be bad at all, but definitely could be a guy you keep around as well, because he's obviously someone who's not going to net a ton of value at the deadline there and does have quite a bit of familiarity as well, like Brodzinski, with this organization. Then you've got Matt Rempe. He's definitely a guy who I do see being around here long term. Obviously, still a young prospect. Definitely a very interesting player, with all the hype around him and the physicality that he does bring there. Definitely kind of an interesting type of player that he obviously is. So he's a nice, kind of fun guy to watch as well. So I do see him kind of being on this team long term and, hopefully kind of really round out his game a little more and really become a very impactful kind of fourth liner on this team. Then you've got Arthur Kaliev. We'll have to wait and see. He is an RFA this upcoming offseason, so the Rangers are going to have a chance to, re-sign him obviously pretty easily with him being an RFA. So maybe he ends up coming back on a 1-year contract potentially. I wouldn't be shocked at all if that did happen there, because he is still someone who, as of right now, is still only 23 years old. So it's not like he's some 27, 28-year-old kind of guy. He's still fairly young, so definitely still some room to kind of, maybe get back on track there towards his development where it was in the past, and maybe end up being a kind of 20-goal scorer for a couple seasons with this Rangers team at the NHL level, which would definitely be a very good thing for someone who's picked up off waivers for absolutely nothing. Next up here, we have Will Cuylle, who is someone who has kind of really broken out this season. I definitely expect him to be a very long-term player on this team. I think eventually he should end up hopefully signing a pretty long-term deal. My guess is this offseason, with him being an RFA, a restricted free agent, his contract being expiring, I do expect him to probably look to sign more of a kind of, shorter kind of prove it kind of deal, maybe like a 2-year deal, 1 or 2 year deal, something around there, just to kind of, have another season or two of kind of really showing this kind of play again. And then obviously potentially signing that kind of longer term deal to really kind of, get a big payday. But I don't think he's going to be getting that kind of long-term deal this season, because, his rookie season wasn't quite as good offensively, but, this season we really saw him kind of, really kind of round up that all-around game. Although, the hits are pretty good as well this season so far, he's definitely still keeping that up. The all-around game definitely took a big step up from his rookie season, but we need to kind of see that for one more season, I guess, before you really see him sign that long-term deal. But definitely is a very unique player. I mean, there's not too many guys who hit that much, play that kind of physical game, have that size, that offensive ability and defensive ability as well. Definitely a very talented guy and should be a very nice core player for this team for a very long time. Then you've got Adam Edstrom, who I do think should be a nice kind of bottom six player for this team. I don't necessarily think he has top six upside, but he is still only 24 years old with that massive size there. He can play wing and center as well, can play either side, so has that versatility, which is very nice. He is someone who I do hope to see him on this team long term. I think could be a very good player in that bottom six, and he is also on RFA this upcoming offseason, so he'll probably end up signing a maybe 2-3 year deal, something like that. But I don't see him, getting anything too crazy. But if he did sign maybe a 2-3 year deal, maybe you're looking at like a $1.75 million cap, something like that, maybe 1.5, something around there, possibly maybe 2 mil at most. But I definitely do think that he is a nice kind of player there. And if you can re-sign him on a 2 year deal like 1.75, I think that'd be pretty fair for both sides. Possibly something around there definitely could make a bit of sense. Next up here, we've got Brett Berard, who is a pretty solid young player. I mean, so far at the NHL level, I think he's done a solid job there. Has not been, amazing, but I don't think it's been bad by any means either. So I think he's had a nice little impact there at the NHL level to kind of begin his NHL career, which is definitely a good thing for this Rangers team, who obviously need to see more young talent kind of make the NHL level there. So seeing him kind of take that step so far this season, obviously got sent down, but it's still nice to see that he has, played decent so far at the NHL level, which is a good sign for a young player. Then you've got Sam Carrick, who did sign a 3 year deal this past offseason, and I do see him probably finishing out this contract. Maybe he does get traded later on, but I don't see him getting moved at this upcoming deadline because, he did just fairly recently sign that 3 year deal. I think he's a guy who, with that physicality, that toughness, fourth line center there, he's making $1 million per season. I mean, you're not going to get a ton for him anyways, so you might as well keep him around because he is a solid kind of fourth line center, which we definitely need that center depth. So I think he's a good guy to kind of keep around on this team. Then you've got Alexis Lafreniere. He obviously signed that massive extension, so I do see him sticking around. I don't see him being traded away unless some crazy deal happens where Brady Tkachuk becomes available. I don't really think we're going to be seeing Alexis Lafreniere get traded away. Then you've got Riley Smith, who I do think is going to get moved away, hopefully at this upcoming deadline. Otherwise, he's probably just going to walk away in free agency for nothing. So hopefully he's moved away at the deadline for some kind of draft capital and or prospects. Next up here, we've got Philip Hedl, who still has 2 more seasons left under contract with just over a $4.4 million cap hit. And I do think he's probably going to stick around. He's a nice young center. I mean, he's still only 25 years old. Yes, the injury factor is a big thing there and definitely sucks and can have a pretty big impact on how many games he ends up playing. But when he's healthy, he has definitely been one of the better players in this New York Rangers lineup for quite a few seasons now. So I do think he's a nice guy to kind of keep around on this team because he does have that flexibility of being able to play center and wing, but obviously with the lack of center depth, him being a centerman is definitely the very important thing for this squad. Then you've got next up Vincent Trocheck, who is on a pretty nice team-friendly contract, I think, making $5.625 million for 4 more seasons after this one. He is 31 years old as of right now, but I think he is right now on a pretty good contract. And I think his contract's going to be one that, for this entire kind of contract here, right up until the end in 2029, that, summer, when the contract will expire, I think it's going to be a pretty solid one up until then. So I definitely do not see him going anywhere. And next up here, we have Chris Kreider, who I do not think should be traded away. With him being the longest tenured Ranger and being up there for so many records and being on this team for so long and him being a nice kind of veteran guy, I think keeping him around for some of the younger guys definitely could be a good idea. So I think having him on this team is definitely the right decision. So with him having 2 more seasons with a $6.5 million cap after this season, I think keeping him around is definitely the right idea. Then you've got Mika Zibanejad, who, if you can trade him away and not have to give up a ton of assets alongside him and retain a ton of money, I think go for it if you want, but I think he more than likely ends up staying on this team. And then we have Artemi Panarin, who does have 1 more season under contract with this team after this season. And I think he potentially ends up re-signing as well. So we'll have to wait and see what does happen after next season when he does become an unrestricted free agent. Not this upcoming summer, but the next one after that. It'll be interesting to see kind of what he does, but I do think that he very well could end up coming back and maybe just end up signing an extension at some point as well in the future. Now for the defenseman, and we have Zach Jones here, who I do think should be traded away. I mean, he's obviously been given permission to seek a trade for himself, so I think trading him away is probably what's going to happen. I mean, hopefully for his sake as well, so he can, leave this team and probably get some more consistent ice time, so that very well could end up happening. Then we got Urho Vakanainen, who is a UFA this upcoming offseason. I think he kind of sticks around here, ends up finishing the season on this team, and just walks away more than likely in free agency, although maybe he ends up kind of, coming back in a depth role possibly as well in this organization. Then you've got Braden Schneider, who I definitely do think is going to stick around for the kind of hopefully long-term future. He has a $2.2 million cap hit for next season as well, and then he will be a RFA with arbitration eligibility after the season of 2025-2026, and I definitely do imagine he will come back on this team and probably be a long-term piece. He's a nice two-way defenseman, and hopefully he can kind of continue to grow and develop and kind of get better, because he hasn't quite taken that big step yet in his game, and I do think he definitely still has that potential to be a really good and kind of consistent top four, two-way defenseman, where he's putting up maybe 25 points, 25 points per season, but just being a really good, reliable defensive guy and really being able to play that good physical game as well, which he definitely can bring at moments as well. Next up here, we have Will Borton, who I do think, with him being an expiring contract and all that, I think it could be a nice kind of rental to trade away to a contending team. He's got that 6'3" size there, physical guy, decent defensively, can move the puck a little bit there. Right-handed shot defenseman, definitely could be coveted by multiple different playoff teams. Then you've got Keandre Miller, who is an RFA this upcoming offseason. I think with his value kind of dropping so much, I'm not quite sure he gets traded at this upcoming deadline, but maybe he ends up getting moved at some point in kind of a package deal for a possible star. That definitely is a possibility. Otherwise, maybe he does just kind of end up getting re-signed, which I do think is a possibility, although I know with how he's kind of played, a lot of Rangers fans very well might not end up wanting to see him back on this team, for the 2025, 2026 season, for next season as well. Then you've got Ryan Lindgren, who with him being an expiring contract and with how kind of bad he's played so far this season, I think you definitely just need to kind of look to trade him away. If you can get pretty much anything back in return, I think you have to do it. So the kind of question is, what is out there? Is there anything available for him? Obviously, that's kind of the question. But if you retain some money on him possibly as well, that could definitely kind of drive up the value. And if you get his cap down to $2.25 million, which if you're retaining 50%, that's what you could do. That could definitely be enticing for a team to, get him in a kind of bottom pairing role, possibly being their number 6 defenseman, going into a kind of playoff run, possibly a long-term playoff run. Having a guy like that as your 6/7th defenseman is definitely not the worst thing in the world. So that could be a decent kind of, pickup for some team. And then you got Adam Fox, who, let's be honest here, he's going to stick around in this team for years and years to come. Now for the goaltenders, we have Igor Shesterkin, who, like Adam Fox, there is definitely going to be on this team for a very long time. He just got that massive new deal and is going to be here for more than likely that entire contract. And then Jonathan Quick, I think with him being an unrestricted free agent this upcoming offseason, he very well could end up retiring, although I'm not quite sure. I mean, maybe I could be wrong there. I'm kind of leaning towards maybe he does, but you never know. He could come back. Maybe the Rangers do re-sign him, but I think it is possible that we could end up seeing the Rangers go in a different direction this upcoming offseason with their backup goaltender position. Anyways, I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, definitely hit that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content, and also definitely comment down below your thoughts on all these New York Rangers players who are currently on this roster. Who do you think are kind of long-term pieces on this team? And, who do you kind of want to see on this team long-term as well? Who do you want to see traded away? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next one. Let's go Rangers.